Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day with Ms. Sulaiman Lede. Now, let's bring in someone who knows about social intervention programs. Joining me now live in the studio is someone who's done this before, and she's Aisha Waziri Umar. She served as the Borno State focal person for the Social Investment Program from 2019 to 2022. She's also the founder and chief executive officer of Inara Foundation, a non-profit organization set up to assist the victims of violence in Nigeria's northeast. Good to see you, and thanks for your time. You know, the issue of trust is something that bites really, really deep into our fabric, and to the extent that a lot of people still don't think that. First, look at the register, talking about the National Social Register, which the World Bank has also commended. But for the first time, we're getting to see a little bit of drawback and pullback from state executives. Speak to us on how to best or better identify the vulnerable in our society.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm actually not surprised about what is going on now regarding the pushback that we are seeing from the governments, from state governments. The Social Investment Register, as you know, is a World Bank initiative. World Bank, they're not grants, they're loans, okay? So this loan was taken just at the beginning of the former President Buhari's regime. And the idea, of course, is to reach out to the poor and vulnerable. And they came up with a very complicated scheme. Complicated in the sense that there were different levels. So you start from the federal level, where the register resides. So what you have is a repository of like the central processing unit, as it were, based in Abuja. And then they had tentacles in all the states. And the idea is that the states would have their own teams on ground, which would be nominated by governors. So you had a the team, the register, the team that were involved in going to the field to register names. So on paper, it sounded quite, quite good because the states were involved. Now, what would happen typically is that once there's a capture, because they would capture them biometrically, the idea is to send the information direct. So they would not go through the states. So in a sense, the capture would be done.
So it goes straight to the federal government?
Yes, they would forward it, yes, to the register. And this register here in Abuja would mine it. They call it mining. So what they mean is that they would go through the list, and essentially they would pick the number of people they felt were eligible. So there's a lot of subjectivity involved. And for me, as focal person, for example, I know that Borno had one of the lowest number of vulnerable. The reason being that when the program was going to start, Borno had quite a few local governments under the Boko Haram occupation. Out of 27 local governments, I think almost 14 were under, yes, at the time they started. So when they were going to the field, they were unable to access many parts of the state. So what they did was they went to a few states, they got some, and Borno had the lowest, actually. So this, my job basically was trying to get...
Sorry to cut you there, the lowest on account of the insurgency there.
Yes, they were unable to register as many people as should, even though we had probably the poorest. Do you see the problem there? So just like the former governor, His Excellency, alleged Senator Obasani said, his state, for instance, many parts because of insurgency haven't been captured. And they happen to be the ones that really need it most. So do you see the problem there? And that's why you find governors getting very angry, you know. I'm sure even Anambra, Governor Soludo would not be happy because in his own case, probably there are parts of the state that need it badly, but because of insecurity, you can't register. So what have you done? You're registering people who are already kind of relatively okay.
So the enumerators, are they grassroots people?
Yes, that's the community-based targeting. Now this community-based targeting, it involves local governments, secretaries, the traditional rulers, and National Orientation Agency. They played a very, very big role in this, a National Orientation Agency. So they were involved as well in targeting. So to be very fair, the idea on paper was a good one. But in practice, because of insecurity, because also the federal had the final say, as it were, as to how many people became registered. I had a running battle with the federal because I felt that they were not uploading or onboarding, they call it. They were not onboarding enough people. So I would come to Abuja, we would go there, I would spend, shouting and getting upset, we need to get our people, and they'll give us this reason, or we're going to do or we're uploading more. Then eventually, maybe we get 5,000 uploaded, and we're like, oh, thank God,
But not everyone can embark on such trip like yourself from Borno State to the Federal Capital Territory. So let's talk about the gaps. You're an expert in doing this. You've worked with the people in humanitarian services. What should be the ideal situation? Should you cut off the states? Because there's a jump. There seem to be a jump. You've collected the data, and you're loading the data directly to the federal government without the input from the states.
Yes, so somehow, because...
Isn't that why some of the governors are kicking?
Absolutely. It was very difficult. You see, federal government side of the story is that they do not want any tampering with the list. But for the states, it's that we know where it hurts us, because we're the ones that know where the poor people are. Just like Kaduna is complaining, Kaduna South, how come we don't have people registered there when they're the ones that need it? So governors are more knowledgeable. But the federal will not allow them, because the way the World Bank designed it, the idea is that you can't tamper with it. It's like tamper-proof. So this is it. But in practice, a lot of arguments, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I can tell you, I went through a hell of a time trying to make federal government and federal understand, and then go back to my states, and then my governor would wonder why we don't have as many. Some states, there was a disparity. That's another problem. So, we have 36 states, we have FCT, different state has different people on the list. And that's another thing.
Let's be practical. What's best for the most vulnerable? Cash transfer or something else? Okay,
very good. You see, for me, a palliative, you're just alleviating a problem to make it more comfortable as palliative. You're not really addressing the root of the problem, okay? Now for me, palliatives would work where you have basics. You have water, you have education, you have your healthcare, basics. Then you go to the vulnerable, you give them either food stamps or you give them, cash or whatever. By the way, another thing I have to say is that it's actually a cash transfer. It's not into their accounts. Because I remember the governor mentioning many don't have accounts. Actually, it's a 5,000 naira stipend monthly that are given to these. Once you're on the register, every month you get 5,000 cash. So that's a misconception that it's an account. You don't need an account.
Oh, you don't need an account?
No. It's a cash. That's why it's called a conditional cash transfer. But when they say transfer, people think it's a transfer. No, it's not.
And that's why people worry. Because how do I know that for sure someone is getting the money?
Well, a team will come with stash of cash, and they would travel into the hinterland and we go and distribute cash every month.
I chuckle on this because it doesn't look straight, because even for those who are so religious, the temptation of
the thing is
converting someone's cash.
So let me tell you something. As a focal person of the social investment program, I was never involved in a cash distribution, never, even though I represented the states. So it was a team that would come with the cash to the states, and they would go out, and I think they had a team, the conditional cash transfer team. They had program managers. Program managers were from the states, but not the focal person. So that was another very strange thing that happened, was that even the focal persons were not involved in the actual operation. Ours was just to be a liaison between the state and the federal government.
Aisha, give us a sense of how 5,000 naira works for some of these people with the Borno example. Typically, use me as an example. I'm most vulnerable and I have 5,000 and I live in Borno State. How does it work for these people?
Well, okay, so if you have the most vulnerable, because, okay, officially we have about 135 million poor people, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, 135 billion. On the register, we have 48 million. So 135 million poor, 48 million are targeted. The idea is to rank the poor. So it has to be the poorest of the poor, the people on the lowest of the ladder.
Rung of the ladder.
Now those people, 5,000 means a lot too. So definitely it meant a lot. However, when it comes to capturing names and things and that, you really can't say, because I can't tell you for sure that those people on that list, I cannot verify. I can't put my name and say this verified. Neither can the state governor, neither can the focal person. The only people that know who's on that register are the Abuja final register.
Quickly, before you go, because the federal government is setting up the Infrastructure Support Fund, and I'm quite sure you have something to tell us about that, and they say it's to improve healthcare, education, and even the markets. If these are there, perhaps 5,000 could be a little bit magical, but speak to us on how effective this could mean for people who live in the hinterlands of such states like Borno.
Absolutely. In terms of transparency, I think this is something you can show that this is what you've done. One of the problems with the cash transfer is the issue of what's shrouded in so much secrecy. So that's number one. And number two, it would be great to do a proper impact assessment of the NSIP, that's the Social Investment Program, the World Bank program. It's good to do a scientific assessment and see the impact it had. I don't think it's a good idea to just pick off the top of your head. You'll get different opinions. So this is something that needs ideally to be done, you know, and see what difference has it made. There are ways to measure. You'd have a study, commission a study. The Governors Forum should commission a study and be objective about it. Let's not be emotional. Let's not be political.
Let's not be emotional or political. Aisha Waziri Umar, a fine place for us to say thanks for coming on.
Thank you.